Perfect. We got multiple requests because this was such a popular topic. At one of our last Neighborhood Fire Safe Council meetings, we asked what subjects the Neighborhood Fire Safe Council leaders were most interested in, and one of the most popular choices was having more information about homeowners insurance. And so that's why we reached out to United Policyholders. So Joel, thank you so much for being here. It's a subject that has everyone worried and thinking about. And so we really appreciate the time that you're taking to kind of demystify this incredibly confusing topic. And so with that, I'll pass it over.
Eva, thank you for having me. And generally speaking, no one wants to hear about insurance. So it's tough times when people want to hear insurance presentations voluntarily. So I have a PowerPoint. I don't know if you're able to share it. If you're,
I am able to share it. Do you want me to share it right now? I was planning on putting it in our minutes, but would you like me to share it right now, or are you just going to share your
he's
screen?
going to use it.
no, if you would go through it with me, I'd appreciate it. Is that possible?
Go through it. Like, did you want me to share my screen?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I can do that. Give me just 1 second to pull it up.
Yes, so I work for United Policyholders. It is a nonprofit. Most of our work is dedicated to helping people through the claims process, typically after a catastrophic event. We have staff now in Florida and Colorado and Hawaii, but United Policyholders evolved out of the issues from with claims arising from the tunnel fire in Oakland, and has been going ever since. Personally, I worked for the California Department of Insurance for 35 years. Started there as an examiner and ended up as chief deputy commissioner. And in the course of my career, of course, I also went out to many post-catastrophe locations with the department's outreach to help people through the claims process. And of course, the best thing to do in terms of being a homeowner is to try to avoid that situation altogether by doing all you can to protect your own home. So I'm going to go through a PowerPoint here. Hopefully it's helpful to you. It is about insurance coverage and finding coverage if possible in today's marketplace. Let me just. So next slide, please, Eva. So again, United Policyholders, not-for-profit. And you're not paying me to be here. Insurance companies do not fund United Policyholders. We receive money from grants and donations, so we are very independent and very consumer forward in our perspective on claims handling, underwriting, eligibility, all of these things that revolve around the insurance world. Next slide, please. So I think probably everyone has recently experienced an increase in their premium. I think that's very likely in any group. This is an example of kind of how rate increases roll out. State Farm requested approval from the Department of Insurance of a 20% overall rate increase, but that overall is kind of the key word there, meaning it is an average of how much more their premium will increase as a result of this rate increase. But each community may receive a different level of rate increase. And so just to give you an example of how that increase played out in some of the Mendocino communities, that 20% overall rate increase actually played out on average at about 31% per insured in Ukiah, And of course, that is an average. So somebody might have gotten a 15% increase. Somebody else might have gotten a 45% increase. But the overall average for Ukiah was a 30.9%. Fort Bragg actually and Boonville ended up a little lower than the overall statewide average at 13.4% and 18.8%. But again, those are averages. And some people probably got a little higher. Some people got a little lower increase in Boonville or Fort Bragg. And just if you're feeling bad about the increase you received, just to put an example on there, beautiful place on the California coast, Big Sur, their average rate increase was 48.7% from that 20% on average State Farm increase. And of course, it's not just State Farm that is taking these large rate increases. Allstate, when I put this together, still had a 30% rate increase pending. State Farm had another rate increase pending, again, I think even larger. And almost every major insurer has significant rate increases pending. So unfortunately, the end of the rate increases is not quite over. Next slide, please. And a little bit about how those rate increases play out. This is just a map screenshot, satellite imagery of Ukiah. And you can't see them specifically because this is satellite imagery, but there are two red circles there. And I would say back in the in ancient times, let's say around the year 2000, the two homes that are kind of right in the center of those red circles would have paid the same exact rate and would have had the same level of eligibility, whether the insurer was going to be willing to write those rates. Oops, you still hear me? So, so that was, then, same eligibility, same rate for these two homes. But what came into play and what this slide is meant to represent is that a new tool came into place, which used satellite imagery to come up with a scoring mechanism based on differentials in data. And insurers started measuring slope and fuel in this vicinity of the home and accessibility of the home. And the two homes pictured here in the red circles could have ended up with very significant rate differentials and eligibility differences just based on being a couple blocks apart from each other. The one on the left, let's say, might be a little further up the hill, a little further from a fire station, and a little closer to more fuel, either brush or woodland, as you can kind of see, which is creeping in from the left side of the screen. So that was one iteration of changes in insurance. And next slide, please. But it has the degree of data and the granularity, I'll say, of the view of the home has even increased from there. Insurers now use aerial imagery, beyond satellite imagery, aerial imagery, much closer look at a home. And now you're able to view whether, in this particular slide, you see that the trees around this home actually are branching out over the roof line, which is pretty much a common cause of being non-renewed today. The data that flows into the insurers automatically includes things, of course, the age of the home. The age of the home tells the insurer what the building codes were that were in place when the home was built. So for example, homes built in the 80s would have a ember resistant vents potentially as part of the standard build, something homes from the 60s didn't have. So it's actually one reason if you do replace your vents with the ember resistant vents, you need to tell your insurer that. They don't know that. You need to report each mitigation step that you take. But that's one in particular, but it also says that there's a lot of data that insurers are already taking in about the home that is changing the rate levels between, in this case, the home that we're featuring there in the middle of the screen and the home right above it that doesn't have tree limbs growing over the roof. So again, homes that would have been easily eligible for insurance 25 years ago may no longer be eligible, or if they are, would have to pay a lot more in premium. Next slide, please. So, one of the changes that has happened in the last couple of years, the Department of Insurance has adopted a set of regulations that define mitigations you can do to your home and property that would result in a mandatory discount that your insurer has to offer. Luckily, most homes have a Class A fire rated roof. So if you have that, you need to make sure that your insurer knows that. That's a discount. Enclosed eaves, that's a tough one. Most homes probably don't have that, and that's pretty expensive to do. But again, you don't have to do every one of these to get the discounts for the ones you do. Fire resistant vents, that's another one. Multi-pane windows, most homes have those. 6 inches of non-combustible clearance at the bottom of the house to your wood siding potentially will get you a discount. And then there are a series of property level ones. One of them, very interestingly, was in the news last night in the Bay Area. The town of Orinda, which is next door to the town I live in. I live in Moraga down in the East Bay. The town of Orinda is looking to adopt a town ordinance that would require every home to have no combustible materials within 5 feet of the home. So that means not only planting your trees, bushes, but it also means the wooden fences that many suburban homes have that connect on either side of the home. Those last 5 feet of fence, if they are wooden fences, would need to be either removed or replaced with a non-combustible material. And wood fences like that, I say, go throughout my neighborhood. Unfortunately, fire departments consider those like that wooden fence as a chain that brings fire right to the home from the home next door or the home behind it. So they want to break that chain by removing those last 5 feet of the fence. And so I have seen some people already doing this on their own with kind of wrought iron gates, for example. But now we're going to potentially see it on scale on a neighborhood basis. And I'm hoping they come up with some great innovations that are affordable and suit people's need of having privacy and security along those gates. So that's kind of a very interesting one that is occurring in real time. Other discounts are for community level mitigations, excuse me, such as being a Firewise USA community. So again, if you've done any of these actions, you need to tell your insurer because you'll get a discount. Now, unfortunately, you can have done all of these mitigations and not even be eligible for coverage. So, it didn't take care of the problem for everybody, but at least for people with whatever admitted insurer they have. And this is, again, just for admitted insurers. They will get these discounts with their insurer. The FAIR Plan also offers these discounts, but not individually. You get a discount if you take all the building hardening measures, and another discount if you do all the property level mitigations. So they're in two groupings, but at least these discounts are available. So next slide, please. So what happens if you're non-renewed? Unfortunately, that is a common experience today in California. By law, admitted insurers, well, any insurer has to give you 75 days notice. And, we got to say, first, they have to give you a detailed reason, has to be objective, risk-related, and consistent with their underwriting guidelines about why they are non-renewing you. If anything is inaccurate in that description, for example, they say they're non-renewing you because you have a wood-shake roof when you actually have a composition shingle roof, you need to let them know. But if it's something, a little more arbitrary, or you want to appeal it, but you're uncertain, or they are accurate in identifying something that is a risk that you really can't change, you need to start shopping right away for a new carrier. So again, even if you're going to appeal it, start looking for coverage elsewhere. We know it is a very challenging market. And the last note here is make sure you thoroughly shop the insurance market. I'll say this, if you are with, let's say, a State Farm agent, they only represent the one company. So their only other option they might be able to offer you is a fair plan policy. And so you don't want to settle for immediately accepting a fair plan policy. If you're with an independent agent, if your insurance has been placed through an independent agent, then that agent may represent 5 or 6 insurers, or 7 or 8 maybe at the most. That there are many more insurers that write homeowners insurance in California than 7 or 8. There's more like 80. So you're going to need to contact multiple agents. So you want to get going, you have those 75 days. And I'm going to admit right out of the gate here that that it is challenging to find new coverage in this market. It can be a total wild goose chase, and you may end up in a fair plan at the end of it. But I still think it is worth the effort of trying to find an admitted insurer if you can, or at least comparing a non-admitted insurer's rates with the fair plan and difference in condition costs. So next slide, please. So again, the common reasons for non-renewal: age of the home, that typically is a concern about some of the components in the home, such as whether you have knob and tube wiring, some Victorians still have, or cast iron plumbing or something like that. Age of the roof is a common issue. Most insurers are not writing roofs that are older than 25 years, kind of galvanized pipes, I mentioned, knob and tube wiring. Insurers are increasingly avoiding pools and trampolines. And many insurers are non-renewing just because of the value of the home. In other words, they are reducing the profile of how much value they want to write in any particular house. If they're writing a $3 million home, that's going to mean they also on that policy would have $1.5 million of contents coverage, extra expense coverage, additional living expense coverage. So that home, looks like a $3 million limit on the house, adds up to $6 million in exposure. So a lot of high value homes are having a real challenge finding coverage today, because these new limitations on how high values insurers want to write. And for example, in the Orinda situation that was causing some of their actions to change their codes. State Farm did the most number of non-renewals in Orinda, in large part because both it had high value homes and a high concentration of insureds in that fairly small community. So they felt they were over concentrated, kind of an issue State Farm brought on itself, right, by probably placing several agents in Orinda and writing as much business as they could. And now with wildfire risk a concern, they're rethinking how much business they wrote in many communities around California. Next slide, please. And by the way, I'm going to take as many questions as I can after I go through this. So again, insurers have to give you a wildfire risk score, explain what that score means. A lot of the things in a wildfire risk score, really you don't have much control over. I mentioned earlier, a lot of it's based on slope and distance from the fire station and how close you are to a fuel load of brush or forest. A lot of times that brush or forest land isn't located on your property. It's up the hill and, maybe just open space or a park. But you should ask your insurer, is there anything you can do to lower your score? If you don't think they're treating you right, you should contact the Department of Insurance. There's an 800 number there. And of course, going to their website. And I'm going to cite a couple other pieces of information on the Department of Insurance website. But no, you're entitled to a clear reason for a non-renewal. And if you're able to correct that non-renewal, you are entitled to be renewed. Next slide, please. So I want to mention, again, United Policyholder, where I work, we have some shopping tips to help you search the market. More than just the one agent, you're going to need to work with several agents potentially to find coverage if you're able to deal with that. Kind of give you information of how to work through the process. That's on our website, uphelp.org, and you can see a little bit of a weird run-on word though, but it means California Insurance Help, CA Insurance Help. So try out our website for assistance. Next slide, please. And the California Department of Insurance has a great webpage that also could help you research how to really do a full search of the marketplace. So if you go to insurance.ca.gov, you go to consumer assistance under homeowners, you'll find they have an insurance finder tool that sometimes is able to, find insurers still writing in your zip code. There's a page that is the top 10 tips. And you go take that link, and it gives you 10 sources of how to shop the market. One of the things that's there is a list of the 800 number of every insurer, every admitted insurer, that is, that writes homeowners or residential coverage in California. So you can call that 800 number, ask if they'll give you a quote, if they're a direct writer, or the name and phone number of a local agent. And I mentioned, there are dozens of insurers that write coverage. I mean, you probably never heard of American Modern Mutual or Tokyo Marine, perhaps, but there are, it's kind of lesser known insurers that do write a small percentages of the California market, and your home just might be eligible with one of them, even while some of the larger insurers aren't writing new business. It could be, again, a wild goose chase to go through this, but the money you save being with an admitted insurer is likely to be substantial compared to either a non-admitted insurer or the FAIR Plan And so I kind of think it's worth the effort, despite the frustration you might feel of going through the process. And, I'm very sorry. That's just the way the market is today. You can only do your best and, kind of do as much as you can up to your personal tolerance level to deal with it all. But, you may end up back in the same place anyway, but I think trying is worth it. So again, this is a great page on the Department of Insurance website. Next slide, please. A couple things about insurance, just some chances to save some money. Key, of course, is to do all those mitigations, as many as those steps as you can. Ask your insurance agent about all the discounts your insurer offers and try to take as much advantage of those as you can. Bundling, of course, your home and auto coverages together gives you a discount both on your home coverage and your auto coverage. So if you haven't already done that, you might want to move your auto over to your homeowner's insurer. And I got to say, raise your deductible is an important one. I know for myself, I had the same insurer for like 20 years. When I got the coverage, a $500 deductible seemed like a lot of money. And then you kind of renew as is year after year. Your limits are kind of automatically moved up by the insurer, but your deductible is never changed unless you choose to do it. And $500, of course, isn't that much money in today's world. So you're going to want to move your deductible up to $1,000 or $5,000 or even $10,000 if that is a level of financial, loss you can reasonably deal with before using your insurance. So a higher deductible obviously results in a lower premium. And it also, the reality is you don't want to be making small claims on your insurance policy. Making a claim, well, that's perfectly legitimate thing to do. That's what insurance is for. But it triggers to an insurer about perhaps an issue at your property. You start with the claims history in that way. And so they're going to take a closer look at, your property and determine whether they want to non-renew you potentially. It's non-automatic. It's not, what they do in each case that they receive a claim. But, you're raising your profile a little bit. So it's better to have a higher deductible and save insurance for when you really need to make a claim. Next slide, please. So I do have to mention there are several categories of types of insurer out there. The ones we're most familiar with are called admitted insurers. They have their rates approved by the California Department of Insurance. They are most of the well-known companies, the State Farms, the Farmers, the Allstates, Travelers, Hartford. So a lot of the well-known companies are the admitted companies. That is where you should have your homeowner's insurance placed. So when you talk to an agent, you want to make sure, if you can, that the insurer is an admitted one. There's a better guarantee fund backing for those insurers if they're admitted, and in case an insurer ever happens to go insolvent, which almost never happens, but did happen after the Campfire in Paradise. Very small insurer did go insolvent, and there was a financial backstop to pay those claims. Non-admitted insurers, sometimes called surplus lines insurers or excess insurers, are kind of like the Munich Re, or some of the companies we maybe haven't heard of so much. So you ask, make sure you're asking your agent, is this admitted or a non-admitted insurer? For non-admitted insurers, you need to check their financial rating because there is no backstop if they are to go insolvent. So you want, just as one thought, a B+ financial rating or better. So keep that in mind. There are government created plans like the FAIR Plan, which is backed by the insurance industry. The California Earthquake Authority is government created. That writes only earthquake coverage though. And then your lender will also place coverage if you have a mortgage and you don't keep your homeowner's policy in place, but it's really to protect the lender's interest, not really yours or your contents. So don't count on that at all. So you want to have, full coverage on your home. Next slide, please. And you're welcome to share this this presentation with anyone, this deck. I know I'm running through a lot of kind of detailed information fairly quickly. And I'll mention here, a lot of people have ended up in the FAIR Plan in the last 3 or 4 years. Again, a FAIR Plan policy is very basic. A fire policy, there's a lot of additional coverages. You have to make even additional coverages to the FAIR Plan policy to even enhance it to a decent level of being a fire policy. It's great in terms that we have anything like this, because some states do not have a FAIR Plan. So at least we do have this backstop. But for most people, they're going to also need to purchase a difference in conditions policy, for example, to get coverage for water damage, one of the most common causes of loss for homes, and liability coverage for your home. Liability coverage isn't, one of the most common kinds of loss, but it can be a significant loss if it does occur. If somebody, for example, trips and falls on your property due to some hazard on your property and you are liable, a FAIR Plan policy has no liability insurance built into it. It's really just a fire policy. So you're going to need to complement a FAIR Plan policy by buying a difference in conditions policy. And of course, this total is going to be a lot more than a homeowner's policy would have been with an admitted carrier. So next slide, please. So again, FAIR Plan policy is a dwelling policy for fire. You need to add it with a difference in conditions policy to get some other important coverages like water damage, theft, and liability. And combined, they equal something pretty equivalent to comprehensive coverage that a homeowner's policy has. But again, there are a lot of enhancements you have to add to a FAIR Plan policy, plus add that difference in conditions policy to equal that comprehensive coverage. Again, check it out at our website, uphelp.org, CFP, meaning for the California FAIR Plan. Next slide, please. And despite, how much insurance costs today, it's always a reminder to say, don't allow yourself to be significantly underinsured. We often find after a catastrophe and looking at how much the people's limits are, it might add up to equivalent of $300 per square foot to rebuild. $300 a square foot probably won't rebuild anything anywhere in California today. And so you can end up very short of the actual cost to rebuild your home. And of course, all the other coverages on a homeowner's policy are percentages of that dwelling limit on the coverage A limit. So often if your dwelling coverage limit is way too low, your contents limit can be too low, your additional living expense limit can be too low. So I know insurance is very expensive, but at least try to get your limit to within the range of reasonable by finding out what the average square foot building costs in your region or your town, and try to at least approximate that. I mean, maybe you don't want to go the whole way given how much it costs, But again, at least get a limit that's within something you can work with if you were to have a loss. Hopefully you never will, and most people never do. But then some people do have that kind of loss and often wish they had more coverage. So next slide, please. And one thing we always recommend is to inventory your personal property. You probably don't know how challenging it is if you have a total loss to make a claim for your personal property. An insurer can ask you to list every single thing that you want to claim, the date you purchased it, how much you paid, the condition it is in today. And, imagine doing that for every little thing that you own. But the process can be made a lot easier if you would at least simply walk through your home with your phone, taking a video of everything you have, including everything in your closets, in your drawers, in your cabinets, in your garage. It'll really help you more readily prove up your loss that, yes, I did own this much stuff. This is what it was. I had this much furniture. I had this much stuff in the garage. And often, insurers will relieve you of doing some of the more grueling parts of that item by item claims process if they have evidence that you're likely to deserve all or a significant portion of your contents limit. And, it just helps you in case of a theft or anything else, much less than a fire that can occur, to have this kind of evidence of your possessions. Next slide, please. So what does the future hold for our marketplace? Well, the California Insurance Commissioner has something that he is referring to as a sustainable insurance strategy. It's basically what I guess is being referred to as modernizing the California's rate approval process to allow a couple components that aren't currently allowed. And that is to allow insurers to use these what are called catastrophic risk models that look at the insurer's book of business, like where all the homes are that insurer writes, and predict what the likelihood of loss is among that book of business, so the insurer can load in that level of potential loss into their rates and also pass through their reinsurance costs in their rates. Neither of those are currently allowed in California. And so the Commissioner Lara is calling that modernizing the rates. The reality is, that is true, but it will result likely in much, much higher premiums. Hopefully it will increase availability of coverage broadly across the state and in regions where it's really challenging right now to get availability of coverage with an admitted carrier. But you will be paying for that privilege. So if these rate increases, like I pointed out, that State Farm's taking aren't tough enough, unfortunately, there are more increases to come. Next slide, please. I hope you can take a look at our website and take our California Home Survey. Kind of gives United Policyholders a better perspective on where issues are. We try to direct our resources to communities that are having the most issues with insurance coverages and help out in any way we can by providing information that can be helpful. Next slide, please. And we do have a set of county by county mitigation and insurance information on our website under our uphealth.org/WRAP, which is Wildfire Risk Reduction and Asset Protection. I know, sorry for the acronyms. but there's a lot of information there, county by county, about resources and activities and groups that are working on risk reduction in, for example, Mendocino County. Next slide, please. There's also a lot of information from the state. Look up listoscalifornia.org. Has a lot of disaster readiness information. Next slide, please. And have I mentioned uphelp.org? I think I have 5 times, 10 times maybe now. So thank you for having me. I think this is the last slide, hopefully. And then I can take any questions that we have time for or that people have. And that ends the presentation. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joel. That was so informative. Yeah, let me just, I see that we got questions in the chat, which we can start with some of those and then open it up. Dave, yes, we can give you a copy of the whole presentation in the minutes for this meeting. I'll send out a link that will have this whole PDF, this whole presentation that Joel just gave with that information. Okay, and then Jim, I have your question, but would you rather read it yourself? Okay, if not, Jim asks, so even if you are complying with CAL FIRE defensible space, no branches within 5 feet of roof or 10 feet of your chimney, the insurance companies can still use overhanging branches that comply with those CAL FIRE minimum distances as a reason to non-renew your policy.
Yes, so every insurer has their set of eligibility guidelines for both new and renewal business. At any time, they can make those more restrictive. And despite the fact that the state mandates that there are certain discounts available based on mitigation actions, those aren't mandates that the insurer has to write in every region or at every risk level. So an insurer could choose to write just downtown, urban business, if that's their risk profile. And, you could do all the mitigations you are able to do. But if you're on a slope or near a forest or a brush area, or have an older home or some other feature about the house that the insurer does not offer coverage to, they don't have to offer you coverage.
And so this is, it includes, I'm referring to a non-renewal.
Yes, so one of the things that has happened is those, whatever standards the insurer puts in place must be applied consistently. So if you're eligible, they have to write you, and if you're ineligible, they have to decline you. But they can choose at a point in time to make those standards more restrictive. So for example, if they wrote fire protection classes 1 through 8, which is a measurement of your fire department's capacity. Right. They could decide, you know what, we're only going to write 1 through 6 going forward. And any new business that applies would have to be in protection class 1 through 6. And they could non-renew all the people they had written previously that were at a level 7 or 8 protection class. So unfortunately, I will say a insurance policy is a one-year contract. It is not a marriage, a lifetime thing. And not that marriages are all necessarily a lifetime thing, but it is a one-year contract. And the commitment is only good for that year. And they can change their policies at any point in time.
And do they need to send you that policy change before they implement it?
No.
Like saying, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to allow any overhanging branches above outbuildings or, whatever it may be, even though you're within CAL FIRE. We're changing our plan. Do they have to let you know that?
They do not need to let you know in advance, like at the point in time where they change the rule. But if they are non-renewing you, they have to give you the specific reason you are being non-renewed. And so, for example, in the example I gave about the fire protection class, you couldn't do anything about that, right? That your town's fire department is your fire department. But if it's, you have limbs overhanging your roof and you get the 75-day notice, I believe legally, if you get up there or, hire someone to remove those limbs, and that is the reason they gave you for the non-renewal, and you remove that reason as an issue, then they should renew you.
Should. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the reason for the notice, in part, is both to give you time to find coverage elsewhere, or if possible, to correct the issue if it is within your control to correct.
Great. The next one was from Sidel, which is there a list of the companies that are writing policies for California, which I believe is in your presentation, right? And so when I share that.
Yeah, I mentioned, for example, on the Department of Insurance website, there's that list of the 800 numbers of every insurer. And unfortunately, it does not say actively writing or what their underwriting guidelines are. So it's whether or not you want to put yourself through the misery of receiving, 100 declinations over the phone, which is very likely if you're in a high risk area and, just end up with a fair plan, or whether you have the patience to go through the whole process on the off chance that you find some lesser known company or a well-known company, right? It could be Travelers that your agent didn't represent that is willing to write a policy. And I will tell you one thing, why you can't go by sometimes what your neighbor just said. Some companies have allowed agents to write a certain number of policies in a given month. Like we'll let you write 2 pieces of new business this month, they might tell an agent. Well, if you're the third applicant with that agent, you get told, no, I don't write coverage. I don't have any option. You might go to another agent who represents the same company. They'll say, oh yeah, I was allowed to write 2 policies and you'll be the second one. So, lucky you. But, it is really challenging. And you can imagine if you have, if your home honestly has a pretty high level of wildfire risk based on its placement, it may be impossible. But if you're like in that screenshot I showed of Ukiah, you're the one a little further up the hill, a little closer to the green belt, maybe there's still a chance, right? The fair plan, I'll just say, is very expensive and you have to buy that difference in conditions. So it's worth an effort to try to find coverage.
Great, and that leads into one of Carla's next questions, which is, do homeowners ever combine a California Fair Plan policy with a private insurance plan? And she also asked for clarification with the admitted versus non-admitted insurers.
Yeah, so that was one of my slides, is to get something approximating a homeowner's policy. You need to, and you end up with a Fair Plan fire coverage, you're going to need to ask your agent, well, what do I need to do to make this Fair Plan policy a little more complete? But you're also going to need to buy another policy if you want full coverage like a homeowner's policy. Those policies are called difference in conditions policies, sometimes referred to as a DIC, sometimes referred to as a wraparound because it wraps around the Fair Plan policy. But that difference in conditions policy is the one that gives you water damage coverage and liability coverage and some of the additional broader coverages that Fair Plan policy doesn't give you. And of course, the Fair Plan policy itself is going to be more expensive than your homeowner's policy probably was. And then you're adding a difference in conditions policy. it's an expensive combination, but that's what you need to do to have something like full coverage of the homeowner's policy you likely have today.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And Susan was asking why knob and tube and cast iron are bad. Which
Yeah, knob and tube wiring tends to have, well, mostly, of course, it can short or fray, and knob and tube wiring hasn't been part of building codes in, I don't know, 60 more years. It's most common in California in Victorian homes. And it's actually one of the main reasons many insurers won't write homes, for example, in San Francisco, right? A lot of Victorians, and a lot of them haven't had their electric upgraded, 100 years later. But it's just a higher fire hazard. And the pipe issue there is about fracturing issues with that pipe. I mentioned, I think that water damage is one of the most common causes of loss. A pipe bursts, and older piping tends to have had years to rust. And so, the idea is to avoid water damage claims and electrical fires that come with those electrical and plumbing systems.
Thank you. Lisa was wondering, in rural Mendocino County, how does distance to a fire station figure in rating?
Yeah, distance to a fire station has always been a piece of the rating equation. Generally, from the beginning, what's called protection class is a major component of your rate, and a protection class is a rating of the fire district that responds to a fire at your home. But even beyond that, today, access is a component I mentioned in one of those wildfire risk tools. They're looking at, even though you might be in a protection class 4 or 5, which is reasonably decent fire protection from a fire department, if you're up a one-way road, narrow road up a hill, that will have now a slope score or an access score that will offset even your fire protection class score. So your fire department score is a big component, but also their ability to get to your home is a big component.
Great. And then I think next was we'll have our hands raised was Francois.
Hi. So a couple of questions. The first question is, I'm on the board of the Community Services District in the Anderson Valley. And one of the things that our fire department is struggling with is whether we should be closing some of these kind of satellite fire stations, because they're very expensive for us to maintain. Although the fire chief is wondering if that might affect ISO ratings, which is distance to various homes. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it affects your ISO rating. I guess it does. It is about the staffing and equipment and all of the fire department. But I do think it would definitely impact the access component of the wildfire scoring models. If you're up the hillside, 5 miles from the downtown station, but you're only, 1 mile from the remote or station that exists, you probably have a better access score than otherwise.
So your advice would be not to close the small satellite stations so that access would be closer to people's homes that are more isolated.
Well, not involving myself in your local politics, but I will say that it likely
No, it's
changes
not
your risk
politics.
score
It's just understanding
in a
what
negative
the,
way.
what the, huh?
I think it changes your risk score in a negative way
And,
from an
okay,
insurance
I can
perspective.
transmit that to the fire chief. The other question that I have is a personal question. Our fire insurance went from, we're with AAA, and our insurance went from like 8,500 a year to 18,500 a year. And I complained, I wrote them a letter saying, we've done all this mitigation. We have 13,000 gallons of water, gravity fed to 4 standpipes near the house. We have a ceramic tile roof. We have no vents. We have, the underside of the house has no vegetation, blah, 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 blah. And they said, well, we have 3 underwriting factors. You're on a slope, or there's a slope in front of the house. Access to your property. We're 4.5 miles up a dirt road. And there was a third factor, I can't remember. And it seems like, all the other stuff that we've done, like we've done fuel reduction on 23 acres of our property. We've done all these other mitigation. I've put sprinklers around the decks of my house. None of that counts. It's just these 3 factors, fact that we're in a fire zone, the fact that we're distant from a fire station, and we're close to a slope. And is there any value in me trying to look for a reduction with them, or is that just sort of, I have to, if I want to stay with AAA, that's what I have to live with?
Yeah, so this is just me speculating, but
Right.
I would expect it'd be hard for you to find another admitted insurer.
Uh-huh.
The insurer has to apply both its risk scores and as part of its rating plan and its underwriting guidelines consistently. So what they've done, based on that slope and access components, for
Right.
example, and close to fuel load,
Right.
those have an impact on rates for everybody that, the higher the slope, the further away from the fire.
Sure.
Everybody is paying those differentials just built in. I mentioned at the start, State Farm got this 20% rate increase,
Mm-hmm.
and it's ending up 50% for some people. Well, the people it's ending up 50% for are the ones with the slope and all of those components.
Of course.
They have to give you the discounts that they have for some of the things you've done, but those discounts may be much smaller than the impacts of those broader considerations of the
Got it.
location of your property.
I don't think we're getting any discounts, but that's the way it is.
Well, they have to give you the discounts that are listed on that list by law.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but they need to know that you've done them for some of them. But if they know you have a Class A roof, they have to give you a discount for that. It's not their option. And telling them that, of the ones you've done, when you take a look at that list again, they're not going to non-renew you for calling in to say, I did these things.
No, you know
So-
what they did though, is they had raised my insurance rates from 8,500 to 13,500. And then when I complained, they said, oh, we made an error. It's actually 18,500. We'll let you leave you at 13,500 for 1 year, but the next year we're going to increase it to 18,500. So,
That sounds a little sketchy to me, and I would contact the California Department of Insurance about that.
well, I copied them on my, interaction with AAA, but, they didn't do anything about it. So,
Give them another call. I mean, being copied on something is different than being confronted with your complaint.
Oh, okay. Well,
That's what I
complaint's
would
a
say.
year old, but I guess it's still worth it. Now, that list of discounts, is that on your website?
Yes, that's on the department's website, it's on our website, and it's on this presentation
Right,
that
right.
you're going to be shared.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I will make sure to include that as well in our
Well,
notes.
thank you for your time. Appreciate you coming and
I
doing
appreciate
this.
being here.
Brian,
I have several questions, and I'll cut it down for time. First a comment. Keith tells me the 30,000 gallon water tank with proper connector can count as a fire hydrant. So our Fire Safe Council is looking into remotely placed water tanks, and that would put you closer to a water source to maybe get your insurance down. I successfully appealed my rates, and I think I got a $200 deduction. So it was worth, maybe it was worth a couple hours I put into the appeal. I don't know. The district, the difference in conditions policies, mine, and I called around to several companies to try to find out about this, and everybody does it the same. It's directly linked to the fire insurance. I'm fire insurance through FAIR right now. So if I have a $400,000 fire insurance policy, my DIC policy is also $400,000. And I think that's bogus. I'm not going to have a $400,000 loss unless my house burns to the ground. If a water pipe breaks, so I would like a DIC policy for only maybe 100,000, but nobody will write that. And I would like to see that changed. So the follow-up question to that is, does UPC do any government lobbying?
We do. I would say this. The difference in conditions policies from admitted insurers, and that's there's a list of the admitted insurers that write DIC policies on that a list of web pages from the department that I put in my presentation. Difference in conditions policies are also have their rates approved by the California Department of Insurance. And so even though, yeah, you're not going to have a $400,000 claim, on a DIC necessarily, the premium you're paying is based on a person with a home of that value. So it is kind of relatively the right premium, and it's a little hard to explain how that works, but since everybody's on that same baseline of their structure value governing their DIC cost, and the DIC rates are based on the insurer's loss history and expenses. It's not, they don't get to load in whatever profit level they want. They are regulated on that. Then even though you won't have a $400,000 claim, that is a comparably fair basis to charge your DIC coverage. So I know it gets a little complicated in insurance terms, but everything is kind of a relativity of how your ultimate premium is calculated. And so there is a list of DIC insurers on the department website as well, if you want to try, some others. But, the baseline for premium for, pretty much every coverage is some common basis, whether it's payroll for workers' comp, or the value of the home, or the construction costs of the home, or square footage of a store, for liability. There is a common baseline that gets you to a rate that's relatively fair for that coverage.
Thank you.
okay, we need to be respectful of time. And so we just have like 3 more questions in the chat, and then I think we'll have to let Joel go about his day. So Cindy just wanted to ask if you have a reasonably affordable policy and you inform your insurer of some mitigation work that you've undertaken, could that backfire by calling more attention to your overall risk factors?
Yeah, that's the suspicion factor of insurers that builds into all of our minds to keep a low profile. But I've got to say these, my experience is these contacts with insurers do not lead to, repercussions, and negative, so calling about an error that an insurer has made, calling to report a mitigation you've done, calling to raise your deductible to a different level. You may get non-renewed the next year. It won't be because of those calls or reasons. It will be because they've further restricted their risk profiles. They don't align issues that aren't risk related to your renewal, right? So if you call to add, hey, I'm adding a pool, is that covered? That changes your risk profile. But if you're calling to say, I've added ember resistant vents, that doesn't make them say, should we have renewed this person in the first place? No, they are separate paths. And if you have a negative thing happen later, it's just coincidental, not because of that call. They want people to call.
Great, thank you.
I just wondered, because of Francois's experience, when he contacted them to complain or whatever, that they ended up raising his rate even more.
Yeah, and insurer, that's why, you mentioned the CC, the department. If they're an admitted insurer, their rates have to be approved by the Department of Insurance. And certainly they could make a rating error, but they can't charge you more because you called. They can only charge you more because they made a rating error.
Yeah, that's what they claim, that they made a rating error.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's
what I would be afraid of.
That's what the department can put that through the process of having the rate verified with the insurer. I don't think contacting them, leads to anything. I guess if you say, I have removed the limbs that were, or I put in ember resistant vents, and they decide, okay, we want to verify that that's happened, and we send an inspector around, and they see that you have limbs over their tree, over your roof line that you hadn't reported, then they have a reason. But if you look, or if you have taken care of the problems around your home that you can, then there is no reason for them to non-renew. But there are potential inspections an insurer could do, right? To verify that something has happened. If an insurer surcharges you for having a trampoline, and you say, I got rid of my trampoline, they may verify that. And if in verifying that, they find that you have all your winter firewood stacked up against your house, that becomes a non-renewal issue, then it's a problem. But I don't, if it's something significant, it's worth reporting to me. I don't think most insurers are that petty unless there's something meaningful that is a risk that they find out about.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And last 2, Carlo is asking if you could explain the fire protection class rating.
Yeah, fire protection class, I don't know all the details of it offhand, but it's been a part of the rating algorithm or calculation for, I don't know, as long as those scores have been in place. So fire protection class is basically an evaluation done by a particular entity, in insurance services office, ISO, gives every fire department in the country basically a score from 1 to 10. 1 being awesome, like they have all kinds of equipment, staffing, and training. Typically that occurs in some of the major cities in the country, where they have the hook and ladder trucks that can reach up 5 stories to, pull people out of a burning building, all the way up to a 10, which means there's no protection whatsoever, no responding fire department other than maybe a Cal Fire station, which does not play into their consideration as being responsive, because Cal Fire mission does not include structure fires. So 7, 8, or 9 means there's very limited equipment, access, a ready station nearby, very limited number of staff. So it's based on a rating mechanism that looks at equipment, staff, training, and vehicles and locations, and tends to be, the lower scores, the best scores tend to be urban than suburban. Most towns are 3s or 4s. And as you get more rural, tends to be 5 and 6. And you get in the 7 and 8, where there's less and less protection, tends to be more out in the hillsides and grasslands, further away from urban or suburban settings.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Last question is from Vishnu, which is just, what's a slope? Why is it a concern?
Yeah, slope is, anything that rises above flat. So slopes became an issue in scoring when insurers adopted some of the models. One of them is fire line, for example. And why slope is an issue, I think maybe the Oakland Hills fire was one of the examples, is that fire tends at times to move uphill more readily than downhill, or more readily into a flat area. So it creeps up the hill, and so the steeper the slope, typically the faster the fire can move forward up that hill. So that's why, slope, so every essential degree of slope can have some bit of impact on your score. That's why I showed that little sample with the Google map of Ukiah. So even a couple blocks difference could put you a little higher on that slope and a little closer to the forested area. So you kind of get a double whammy in the scoring grid that is about access and fuel load and slope. But it is about how winds build and how quickly fire moves up a slope.
Great. Thank you so much, Joel. That was so informative, and thank you for saying and answering all of these questions. We appreciate your time and expertise, and it's really been so great. So thank you again. And yeah, we all really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for all the great questions. And I wish everybody the best. These are trying times, expense-wise and in every way with insurance. So good luck to all of you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so just as a reminder, if you still have insurance questions or would like to go to an in-person community forum, there's going to be the one I was talking about in Laytonville at Harwood Hall with the California Insurance Commissioner and with another United Policyholders representative. So I'll put information about that in our notes. If anyone is at this meeting right now who's not normally our neighborhood fire safe council leader who doesn't usually get our emails, please put your email, a couple of you already have, in the chat to make sure that I can include you on these minutes so that you can get the PowerPoint and information. Again, that's just for anyone who doesn't usually already get our MailChimp emails. Otherwise, we did run out of time, so I don't think we're going to get to Neighborhood Fire Safe Council updates. But if you would like to email me with anything that exciting or interesting that's happening in your area, I'd be happy to include that on our notes as well. Otherwise, we'll check in December. Wow, the end of the year. That's wild. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for putting your emails in the notes. I'm seeing them right now. Otherwise, yeah, we'll see you next time. See you in December. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to end the meeting now. If anyone hasn't had a chance to send me their email, you can do so after this meeting. Thank you.